what's going on? Welcome to the Monday Night Live. Put a 1 in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly off the top. It's gonna be a good one tonight. Let me know if my volume is at a good level. Y'all can hear me nice and loud and crisp and clear. My man James, what's going on? John, good to see you in here. Tyler T, there we go. Shalom, Miss D, the matriarch of the tribe. What's going on, y'all? Good to see everybody tuning in. So basically, I'm gonna keep it tight tonight, but because I got a lot of things that I want to share as far as my journey, my raw vegan journey. And I want to clear up some misconceptions about what a raw vegan diet is and this idea that it is strict and limited and extreme and all of that type of stuff. Because the way that I engage with a raw vegan diet is not in this it's not in this eating disorder kind of way, right? It's not in an ideological fashion, right? I like to do things in a very practical way, right? A pragmatic way. Because there are some stigmas that I want to work to clear up. Because my reasoning is pretty unorthodox, right? My approach is pretty unorthodox to fitness, to nutrition, that type of thing. But it is based on the data that we have and sound reasoning and argumentation, right? So there's two particular streams of thought, right, that guide me. It's the data, right? What does the current scientific data say as far as how our body works and how our body responds to foods and that type of thing. And then there's my experience, and then there's the experience of the people who I provide guidance and coaching to. And I kind of want to just walk y'all through today my thought process and what led me to where I am now and the things that I learned, the most important lessons that I've learned on this journey. All right. So let's start with what a raw vegan diet is. A raw vegan diet, quite simply put, is a diet primarily based around raw foods or uncooked foods, foods in their most natural and whole state. Now, this doesn't mean that you swear off any form of cooking. Now, you can, and that would be more of like a really strict 100% raw fruitarian style of eating. But, if you're following a raw vegan diet and you eat roasted seeds or you eat a baked potato, this doesn't mean that, you're kicked out of the raw vegan club. It's not really how it works. Now, if people want to have a special club or a guild with a membership and you have to meet the prerequisites to this membership, well, I'm not really interested in that, right? What I would liken it to is, let's say you have people who they identify as vegetarians. Just because someone is a vegetarian doesn't mean they don't eat animal products, right? It just means that most of their diet is based in vegetables, right? And there's a very limited amount of meat. There could be no meat, or there could be a very small amount of meat. There's a variety of different ways that you can engage with a vegetarian diet. Even people who follow like this keto diet, it doesn't mean that they don't eat any carbohydrates whatsoever. I mean, if you eat leafy greens, those are a form of carbohydrates. And then you have people on a keto diet and they still eat berries, right? Or people who engage in a carnivore diet. Just because they eat a carnivore diet doesn't necessarily mean that they don't consume dairy, or they don't consume cheese, or even that they don't consume fruit, right? Because in those circles, those carnivore diet circles, they don't just eat meat, but they also eat weird things like sticks of butter. They drink dairy, right? Even though, adult carnivores don't consume dairy, but, Don't need to be super strict about it, I suppose, in the same way that I'm not. And some of them have capitulated and decided to add fruit and honey into their diet. Huh? So you don't need to be any more strict than you have to be. Now you may say, well, what about a vegan diet? Can I still eat meat on a vegan diet? It's like, well, vegan is different because vegan is not a diet. It's an ideology. It's a socio-political frame of mind, right? Veganism is more of a lifestyle. It's more of an ideology. It's basically where a person, when they become vegan, they decide, I am going to live in accordance to the values where I vehemently oppose animal abuse and exploitation, and I refuse to participate in anything or consume anything that requires the exploitation and abuse of animals as much as practicably possible. Right? It's not a diet. So in comes a raw vegan diet. Now, a raw vegan diet, for the most part, is a diet where it's primarily made up of fruits, vegetables, or fruits, leafy greens, nuts, and seeds. Fruits, leafy greens, nuts, and seeds, right? You get a lot of carbs, decent amount of fat, a little bit of protein. Where the macros look like, the macros could be anywhere from 80% carbs to more along the lines of 50% carbs. And dietary fats can be anywhere from 5% to 30%. And protein can be anywhere from 10% to 16%. Right? But fruits, leafy greens, nuts, and seeds. Now, there are other foods where you can consume mushrooms. You can do raw mushrooms. You can do steamed mushrooms, dehydrated mushrooms. You can throw mushrooms in the microwave, which is a way of making the nutrients in the mushrooms more absorbable, or at least that is the dominant belief about mushrooms. There's sprouted quinoa, sprouted mung beans, sprouted lentils, that kind of thing, right? So there are other foods that you can eat that don't really require cooking. There's things like oats or toasted buckwheat. You don't really necessarily have to cook these things either, right? You can just soak them in water, and then you put them and mix them in with a variety of other foods. You can puree them, use them to make other different types of recipes and things like that. You can use lentil flour, chickpea flour, tapioca, all types of stuff. And you can make, raw vegan breads in a dehydrator, things like that, right? More technical things. And use like flax meal as a gluten replacement to create an adhesive, right? Something to hold the bread together. You can use chia seeds to do the same exact thing. So you can actually get really creative with a raw vegan diet and really expand your horizons, right? But those are like accessory things. But at the core of a raw vegan diet, it's mostly going to be your leafy greens, fruits, nuts, and seeds. Why would you want to do this? What is the purpose of doing this? Well, it's extremely convenient. I mean, you don't have to worry about burning food, overcooking anything. You don't got to worry about having accidental fires with the stove, right? It's time efficient. It's great for people with busy schedules. And it is extremely beneficial for people with chronic illnesses, right? People with, let's say, metabolic illnesses, kidney disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, autoimmune disease, anxiety, depression, all types of stuff, gout, GERD, etc. Right? So you would do a raw vegan diet basically out of convenience, or you would do it for healing purposes. It's very beneficial for healing. It's basically a medicinal diet, really. It's an energy-rich medicinal diet, to be specific. I like it. I like eating large food portions with abundance of sweet, water-rich fruits. I like the convenience, and I like the way I feel. I like what it does for my mental and emotional health. So for me, it works very well for me personally. Many other people, right? I subscribe more to the fruitarian side of a raw vegan diet. More of a fruitarian style diet does not mean that you only eat fruit and you swear off everything else. That's not what fruitarian means either, right? Now, some people will be like, I'm only eating watermelon and grapes. Technically, that's fruitarian, but there's a lot of other ways to do it, right? In the same way where somebody on a carnivore diet can be like, I'm only eating steak. I guess that's one way to do it. You can diversify. Not that I subscribe to something like a carnivore diet, because I mean, it has its problems and the risk is not really worth the reward, not to mention it's not in line with my ethics, right? So I subscribe more to the raw vegan fruitarian side of things, where the majority of your food by weight is fruit. So if you had to weigh all of your food in a basket or a bucket or a bowl, whatever you want to put it in, and you was to weigh that food, most of the weight of your food, of your daily food, would be fruit. It's basically, at least how I classify it. I'm the fruit guy. I'm real big about the fruit. You may say, well, why is that? Fruit is a very perfectly designed food, right? Fruit is strong evidence of intelligent design. Fruit is medicinal. Fruit is a very efficient form of energy. Fruit is very convenient and tastes amazing for the most part. My big thing is fitness as well as healing, right? I live a fairly active lifestyle. Building and maintaining muscle and strength and flexibility and all those things is very important for me. And I have a lot of responsibilities. And I am a coach full-time. I am a high raw vegan nutritionist and fitness coach full-time. I have a lot of people who I provide support and guidance and planning for, and I need to be mentally dialed in at all times. And my diet largely is responsible for helping me to maintain that frame of mind, even for me to consistently do these kinds of streams where I'm explaining pretty complicated things in a simplified way. So fruit basically is a combination of a lot of water, a lot of carbohydrates, which breaks down into glucose, or what we commonly know as sugar, which is what our brain runs on, is what all of our muscle runs on, is what all of our vital organs run on. It's the primary source of energy for the human body. Water, sugar, and electrolytes, right? In order for us to feel enriched, vibrant, motivated, focused, powerful, strong, in order for us to have endurance, right? In order for us to have beautiful skin, hair, and nails, reproductive health, hormonal balance, all of that, we need these things. We need to be well hydrated. We gotta have our glycogen stores full, right? Basically, glycogen is glucose stored inside your cells. Glucose, what we commonly know as sugar. And then we need electrolytes, right? Your potassium, your sodium, your magnesium, right? Your calcium. You need these different minerals, these alkalizing minerals, in order to power your cells. And when you have a diet that's rich in fruit, it gives you that abundance of energy, which is really good for your metabolism. It's really good for healing and refreshing and rejuvenating, recovering your body, keeping you in your best form. Now we have starchy foods, right? Potatoes, rice, beans, things like that. But these foods are heavier foods that take a longer time to digest. It can be pretty complicated. And so there can be some challenges that come with these foods. They can cause you to be gassy, bloated. Some of these foods can have negative effects on your kidneys, depending on how much you eat. If you have gut health issues, maybe these foods, you don't really have the stomach enzymes or acids for it, right? So you need something a little bit more simple. You're chronically dehydrated maybe, which contributes to even more issues. So maybe when you eat potatoes and rice and beans and things like that, you become lethargic, right? Maybe you experience kidney pain, right? Things like that, or just pains wherever, swelling, edema, things like that. Some people have conditions like this. Just because a food is a plant food or a whole food, plant-based diet food doesn't necessarily mean that it's a magic bullet. So we got to be a bit more nuanced. So if you're experiencing all type of gas and bloating and problems and whatnot, with a raw vegan diet, and I mean with a whole food plant-based diet, then you may want to default to more of a raw diet, which is typically going to be lower in protein, higher in carbohydrates, and poly and monounsaturated fat sources. Foods that are just generally easier to digest. So that's the rationale, right? Now my journey, because when I decided to switch over to and immerse myself in a raw vegan diet, I didn't really weigh all of that. It was more so a test for myself. But my experiences were revolutionary for me, changed a lot about how I thought about nutrition. Right? Now, truth be told, you know, my lady, she's been way more, she's been raw vegan for much longer than I have. Right? So I'm a bit of a Johnny come lately compared to her. But it's worked wonders for her. And, you know, so I said, you know what, I'm going to be open-minded and I'm going to jump on. Partially in support of her, but also as a learning experience for me. And it's improved my mental health, my emotional and spiritual well-being. It's improved my focus, my motivation. Just a lot of it is brain chemistry. It did a lot to improve my brain chemistry. For me, one thing that I've been afflicted with for a large portion of my life, probably my whole life, was seasonal depression. And the more raw I eat, the better my mental health is. And I don't really have these issues. Right? And in fact, if I feel my mental health starting to get on a decline, or I'm experiencing a lack of creative energy, I'm like, you know what? I need to get more raw and eat more fruits and things like that. More fruits, more leafy greens, more of a water-rich diet. And of course, my teas. So I got to check in on myself. I noticed my skin quality improve. My hair, skin, and nails grow much quicker. I recover from workouts quicker. I have a lot more mental clarity, a lot more creative energy. Everything works better, right? Sexual health as well, significantly improved and optimized in ways where I didn't really think it could get much better than it was. Never really had any problems in that area to begin with, but you don't really know how much better you can get it until it gets better. So constant upgrades, and it's been a few years since I've been on this journey. Fat loss, muscle gain, blood flow, more vascularity, all of that type of stuff. It's phenomenal. Now, most of my life, I've really put a premium and importance on protein. Got to get your protein in, right? And once upon a time when I was younger, you know, I would eat around a gram of protein per pound of body weight. It was that typical kind of thing. Then I got a little bit more refined, you know, along with my education, where I realized, oh, wait a minute, no, it's 1 kilogram of protein 1 gram of protein per kilogram of lean mass. I still kind of maintain that as a baseline, but you actually don't even really necessarily need that. as far as protein is concerned. So like for me, for example, I do just fine with just like 60 grams of protein a day, really. And I've tried this out and I've done this. This is how I know, right? And one of the most important lessons that I've learned is you actually can feel much better when you decrease the amount of protein you consume. That was actually one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from this journey. I'm like, how's that possible? How do you decrease the amount of protein you consume and feel better as a result? It's interesting. And like, I generally like eating more protein, but when I eat less protein, I get better results. It's very interesting. So that's one of those things where the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. That was groundbreaking for me. That's actually the second lesson. The first lesson was how much it improved my mental health. The second lesson is that when you decrease the amount of protein you consume, you actually feel better. Now, of course, I can feel that, and these could be things from my own personal experience, but I'm like, well, what does the data say? What does the literature say? Does that fall in line with the science and the biochemistry of what we know about the human body today? Is that legit? And actually, yes. So for example, if you wanted to improve your mental health, well, what would you need to do? You would need to make sure that you were well hydrated and that you had adequate amounts of electrolytes and glucose fueling your brain. Fruit checks all those boxes. In order to improve on anxiety and depression, which when people come to me and they're like, hey, I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, I have like 100% success rate with that. Everybody who's come to me with mental health issues, we use diet to address it, and we've always gotten extremely positive results. And it happens real quick. I'm talking about like within the week or week and a half at least. It's like night and day. And the feedback that I get, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how much better I feel. I even feel like my ability to see colors has improved. Like people tell me crazy stuff. I sleep so much better. I feel way more motivated. I don't have the brain fog, all this type of stuff. And why is that? Well, magnesium. A lot of people who have anxiety and depression have a lack of magnesium. They have a magnesium deficiency. And so when you have a raw vegan diet, you're able to get a lot more magnesium out of your foods. Whereas, well, if you're cooking all of your foods, you're actually cooking a lot of the magnesium out of it. A raw vegan diet is also very rich in vitamin K and vitamin C. Vitamin C and vitamin K do wonders for your immune system in reducing oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is basically cellular damage or deterioration, right? So you have toxins in your body and they float around your body, and basically there's all of this residual damage from those toxins in your body. So we call this oxidative stress, right? And that oxidative stress can come from oxygen contamination, breathing in chemicals, mold spores, dust, pollen, eating acidic foods, accumulating acid and waste products from your food, you know, all these types of things. Toxins being released from your fat cells and dumped into your bloodstream, all of this type of stuff, right? Even, you know, having a lot of protein in your diet can raise homocysteine levels, increase edema, interstitial fluid, cause you to have swollen lymph nodes, put stress on your kidneys, which causes even more oxidative stress, right? So there's tons of different things that cause oxidative stress, and then oxidative stress provokes your body to respond with inflammation, right? So this is the science behind how that works. And so when you have an abundance of vitamin C and vitamin K in your diet, when you have an abundance of B vitamins, when you have the various different chemical compounds known as antioxidants, consistently coming from your foods and your teas and things like that. All of that works to bring down the oxidative stress. And as the oxidative stress comes down, the inflammation comes down. As the inflammation comes down, well, this translates into better mental health, better emotional health, better sleep quality, better hormonal balance, etc. Right? Even cooking our food can contribute to oxidative stress. So if you're sauteing foods with oils and things like that, you're cooking in oil, you're cooking a lot of the nutrients out of foods. Let's say your leafy greens, and you're cooking your leafy greens, and so you're losing like at least 80% of the magnesium from the leafy greens. You're losing even almost all of the vitamin C from the leafy greens. You're destroying the iron content inside the leafy greens, right? Because iron is susceptible to thermogenesis. So if you're cooking a food under high temperatures, it could be destroying the magnesium, destroying the iron, or oxidizing the iron, right? And so this can be toxic in your body. So when you reduce the amount of cooking, you actually get more magnesium, you actually get more iron, right? And what's funny is that people say, oh, well, cooking improves nutrient absorption. Kinda. But cooking also destroys the nutrients within the food. And the longer you cook a food, the more of that nutrients you destroy. So there's a trade-off, right? And so people don't talk about the other side of the ledger. Yes, cooking improves nutrient absorption. It also destroys a lot of it, right? Interestingly enough, when it comes to protein-rich foods, protein is very susceptible to oxidation, right? So just because a food contains 20 or 30 grams does not necessarily mean that when you cook that food and you consume it, you're getting 20 or 30 grams. Not even close. Right? You're actually destroying the molecular structure of that protein. You're breaking down the amino acid profile of that food in the cooking process. A lot of people actually have a dietary anemia even though they eat meat, and a large part of that is because of they destroy a lot of the iron in the food. They destroy a lot of the copper in the food. They destroy a lot of the vitamin C in the food. These minerals are susceptible to thermogenesis. Right? So we have to have a healthy appreciation for that. Cooking a food isn't the magic bullet that people think it is. Now, I didn't know that until I really looked into. I wanted to challenge my beliefs about what I believed about nutrition, cooking foods, and all. This whole raw vegan thing. Is it a fad diet? I said, well, it's not really a fad, because truth be told, eating raw is where human beings started with nutrition. Cooking came after raw. So it's not really a fad diet. It's just what we started with. Now, cooking isn't all bad. So, for example, I wouldn't recommend you eat raw beans. I wouldn't recommend you eat raw lentils. I wouldn't recommend you eat raw potatoes. I think you should cook these things. I mean, how much you cook them, that's a different story. But they should be cooked enough for them to be edible, right? You don't want to bite into a potato and then lose a tooth. You don't want to just, throw beans in your mouth and just crunch and chip your teeth and swallow and then have, these dry, hard beans passing through your digestive tract, not being digested at all, and just destroying your gut, right? Because it's basically like swallowing marbles at that point. You do have to break down some of the phytic acid and the lectins and things like that inside the beans. So this is what I mean. This is not like some raw vegan religion or ideology for me. That's not what it is. So yeah, you can have good experiences on a raw vegan diet, amazing experiences, right? And the thing is, well, there is actually science to support these things. A lot of people act like, oh, well, there's not enough science on a raw vegan diet to determine how effective it is. Yes, it is, because there's certain things that we know about the human biology, right? But there's a cultural problem where, we have this cultural belief where we overvalue cooking and protein and things like that, right? It's just a cultural belief. It's not really based in science necessarily. Cooking has its place, but it's an accessory. It's not like a primary thing that you need to do necessarily. It's probably the third thing that I learned, right? Now, primarily, I work with people who have chronic illnesses. As far as working as a health coach, as a nutritionist, primarily focusing on reversing chronic illnesses, I've learned, you won't believe the things that I've learned. They're mind blowing. I'll give you an example. You can have kidney disease. You can have certain gut health issues. Maybe you have low stomach acid, gallbladder issues, right? Prostate issues. And there can be certain foods that contain high levels of sulfur and methionine. And these can contribute to complications, especially when it comes to your kidneys, right? So people say, I'm gonna do a whole food, plant-based diet, and broccoli is a really good vegetable because it contains a lot of protein, it contains a lot of vitamin C and iron and K, and those really good vegetables. This is true. It's also a very sulfur-rich food. So if you have gut health issues, you can experience a lot of gas and bloating from eating broccoli, from eating cabbage, right? If you have kidney issues, this can be an irritant that makes your kidney issues worse. Or you can feel some real kidney pain from eating these things. So people decide, hey, I have these chronic illnesses. I'm going to go on a whole food plant-based diet. I'm going to cut out the meat, dairy, and eggs. And that's how we're going to reverse my kidney disease. And then somewhere along the line, people realize this isn't really healing me the way that I thought it would. I mean, there are some slight improvements, but I'm still having a lot of issues, right? When you reduce the amount of sulfur, when you reduce the amount of acid, methionine, cysteine in the diet, then, this is where things really start to improve. So this is where a raw vegan diet really shines. Now, there's science to back this up, right? Even the renal diet essentially is like a low sulfur, low protein diet, right? Now, what's interesting is a renal diet basically is like a raw vegan diet. If you think about it, it's a type of renal diet. The only thing that's disputed is like the potassium. Oh, I can't eat too much potassium if I got kidney disease. And it's like, well, that's true, but it depends on how much potassium do you consider to be too much. That's the thing, right? So the interesting thing about kidney disease is one thing that offsets the potassium is water. Because, the potassium isn't really particularly too much of an issue when you have a water-rich diet, right? So I've had a variety of people with kidney issues, stage 2, stage 3, and even stage 4. We've seen some pretty significant improvements as a result, and we did not reduce potassium intake. What we did do is we increased the carbohydrate intake and we reduced the fats and the proteins. Right? We increased the amount of magnesium in the diet. We increased the amount of manganese in the diet. We increased the amount of copper, vitamin C, things like that, right? And we reduced the amount of calcium. And things improve really quickly. And there's science to support that. One of the biggest disruptors to kidney disease is dehydration. Dehydration is one of the major cofactors of high blood pressure and high blood sugar. Insulin resistance, high blood pressure, or hypertension is in large part caused by dehydration. Dehydration leads to a shortage of oxygen. A shortage of oxygen it causes an imbalance in your pH, right? Your pH balance. So you're supposed to be slightly more alkaline than acidic on a cellular level. But if your oxygen levels drop, acid accumulation increases, and this is where the problems start. So if you have a diet that is rich in water and rich in electrolytes, that increases the oxygen uptake and it increases the hydration level. Thus alkalizes the body and brings the acid down. Interestingly enough, when you have more water and more fruits and vitamin C and things like that in your diet, it increases your kidney's ability to produce urine. This allows your kidneys to be better at excreting toxins from your body. When you decrease the amount of fats, or fatty acids, protein, or amino acids, this reduces the creatinine. Reduces the BUN, the blood urine nitrogen level in your blood or in your kidneys. If you do a blood test, you'll see these things pop up. It gradually improves EGFR, right, the filtration rate in your kidneys. And this brings down your blood pressure, brings down your blood sugar to a healthy level, and this is how you really reverse that chronic illness. Right? Protein, very acidic. Fats, very acidic. Right? Because they break down into things like fatty acids, right? Amino acids. These things are beneficial. Acid is important. I mean, it is needed. Even to have like healthy oxygen uptake and functioning lungs, you still need a certain amount of CO2 present in your body, right? So yeah, you need oxygen in, but you also need CO2 as well, right? You also need carbon dioxide. So there is a balance. You can't be fully alkaline and no acid. That's not going to work, right? Just to paint an image for you, bleach is like the most alkaline substance that you have in your home. And if you put bleach in your body, it will kill you. So we need both, but we just need adequate amounts, right? So this is what we're going back to that nuance thing again. I'm not saying, and I will never say, to cut all of the fat out of your diet or cut all of the protein out of your diet. I would never say you don't need protein. I would never say that. I know what people mean when they say that. When they say you don't need protein, what they really mean is, well, you don't need preformed protein. You need amino acids. And those amino acids, your body takes those amino acids and then converts those amino acids into protein structures, right? You need simple amino acids, and your body takes them and forms its own proteins. Even if you eat protein, that protein is going to be broken down into amino acids and then turned into different proteins anyway. So you don't really need the protein to be preformed. So when people use these terms like, oh, you need complete proteins, and oh, fruits are not complete proteins, or it's an incomplete protein. It's a marketing term. It doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't matter if a food has complete proteins or incomplete proteins. First of all, there's no such thing as an incomplete protein, right? An incomplete protein is just not a protein. It's just simple amino acid structures, right? Like, no one calls a fetus an incomplete baby. That's not, right? No one calls bread an incomplete sandwich. That's just not how it works. These are marketing terms, right? That people want to be like, oh, don't eat them plant foods because, they're incomplete proteins. It doesn't mean anything. So I'm getting a lot into the science, and I kind of have a habit of doing that because I don't really derive my own opinions about approaches to things based on my own personal experiences. I don't do that, right? I like to go by the science. Of course, the science is a bit problematic because it goes against how things actually work a lot of times. Like the protein recommendations, which people ask me about all the time, proteins, right? B12, what's another one? Iron, vitamin K, and all of these different types of things. There's a poor understanding of these things, right? because there's that lack of nuance. So going to protein, now we overconsume protein. Most of us do. We actually overconsume protein. And the people who are the most obese and the most sick often overconsume protein. Because now the more protein you consume, the more acidic your diet is going to be. And your body has to work to neutralize the acid. Right? So if your body keeps doing that, there's a price to pay for it, which results in that high nitrogen content in your urine, which is a bad sign. If you have high levels of nitrogen in your urine, that means that your kidneys are working overtime to excrete all of this excess nitrogen out of your bloodstream. And that's a precursor to cancer formation. That feeds tumors and fibroids and all types of stuff. So all the growths that you may not want, whether it be skin tags, tumors, fibroids, polyps, you don't want these things. And when you put this overemphasis on consuming protein, this is what this leads to over a period of several years, right? To develop a chronic illness, it typically takes a few years. If you do something for a month or two, it's not really going to be that significant. But once you get past like the 6-month part, the 1 year mark, that's when you start having more issues. For some people, it takes 2 years, 5 years, but it does creep up on you. It's insidious in that way. Now, in my own personal experience with the physique that I have, I've been able to gain muscle and strength and improve training performance. And the thing is, my training is actually very intense. I engage in high intensity training. So this whole idea of like, well, if you're a raw vegan, you're going to be weak and tired and not have the energy. That's not true. I'm living proof that that's not true. I'm a major advocate for high intensity training. So, you know, I am literally the human manifestation of the opposite of what people think a typical raw vegan would look like. But a lot of raw vegans are kind of just people where they saw like an influencer on the internet who was saying stuff and they just kind of just took their word for it and just went off on their own and just, okay, so I'm just going to cut out all the cooked foods and I'm just going to eat, 30 bananas a day or something like that. I'm not on my channel telling people to eat 30 bananas a day. My approach is a bit more nuanced than that, right? I don't like to engage in this kind of crude, oversimplified suggestions. I don't really do that. This is the reason why I do these live streams. I believe in diversity and accumulating nutrients from a variety of different foods and eating all your colors, right? Now, what's interesting about like protein, fats, carbs, amino acids, all the nutrients is the human body, we're designed to be like opportunistic eaters. This is the reason why we have binge eating problems and all that type of stuff. We're opportunistic eaters. If we feel hungry and there's an opportunity to eat, we'll eat. If it's food that is hyper palatable, we'll just keep eating it. Because we're opportunistic eaters. It's the same thing with like your dog. If you keep the food bowl full, your dog will get fat because they're opportunistic eaters, right? As human beings, we are the same way. We're opportunistic eaters. And we have the ability to really indulge in food and get it while the getting's good. And that's a big problem for us, right? This is why our food really shouldn't be hyper palatable either. Right? We shouldn't have hyper palatable processed foods. Our body doesn't really know what to do with hyper palatable processed foods, right? This is another major contributor to the obesity epidemic, right? But one thing that I learned is you don't really even need to eat every day. One thing that I got really popular for is eating 4 days a week and fasting for 3 days a week, 36-hour fasts, right? I did this video, I only eat 4 times a week, right? And I did that and I felt amazing doing that. I was able to increase my strength. I was able to train intensely, drop body fat, build muscle, have good mental focus, everything. And only eating 4 days a week. And that blew my mind. And the results were even better when I cut out the Lenny and Larry cookies. I used to eat these Lenny and Larry cookies on my eating days. They're these vegan cookies. They're like chocolate chip and peanut butter chocolate chip and lemon poppy seed cookies. They were so good. I would get a box of them. Oh my God, they were so good, these cookies. I would eat these Lenny and Larry cookies. It would be these 2 big cookies, and just 2 of them would be like nearly 800 calories or something like that. It's crazy. Like 2 of these cookies would be like 32 grams of protein or something crazy like that. And I was doing the alternate day fasting, and on my eating days, I would eat these Lenny and Larry cookies. I would be a little gassy. I'd get a little bloated after eating them and whatnot. And what was interesting was the fat loss was kind of slow when I was eating them. When I stopped eating them, that's when the fat loss and whatnot really took off. And that's when I started really noticing the significant improvements of the alternate day fasting. Just cutting out those Lenny and Larry cookies. That processed food. And just cutting out the Lenny and Larry cookies, and my body was just like let off the leash. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. So there was the mistake. We just fixed that. So that was a big experience for me. Now, my whole entire life, I've always done the fruit bowl thing. No, I shouldn't say my whole entire life. My whole vegan journey, I always did the fruit bowl thing, but it wasn't like this huge fruit bowl. It was one moderately sized fruit bowl a day. It was like 3 meals a day. So on my raw journey, I realized how much you could actually eat, what your portion sizes are. Where I would sit down and one meal would be like 6 to 8 bananas. You know, one meal would be like 48 ounces of watermelon. It would be this big salad bowl filled. It would be like grapefruit, tangerines, kiwis, grapes, watermelon, leafy greens, cashews, pistachios. It would just be all this stuff in this big bowl. And I was like, this is like the raw vegan way. This is like my, and I would name the bowl. I named the bowl Philip. And I remember because I was eating in my videos and eating on stream out of this big bowl. It would be these big portion sizes. And so what I realized is a big mistake that a lot of raw vegans make is they undereat. They don't know how much to eat. If you're doing like, oh, I'll eat like 1 or 2 bananas at a time, or I'll have like 2 apples with a little, you're not eating enough. So yeah, you're gonna be really skinny and emaciated, and you're gonna feel worn out over time because you're barely eating, right? It's a food quantity thing. Or like, oh, you know, I only do juice and eat grapes and watermelon. That's all I don't eat anything else. It's like, well, yeah, there's gonna be some holes. There's gonna be some nutrient gaps, right? Where's the leafy greens? Where's the nuts? Where's the seeds, right? Where do you get your omega-3s from, your omega-6? You know, where do you get certain amino acids from and the amounts that you need them? Yeah, you do need to diversify. It would make sense if you're like, hey, I'm gonna eat grapes and watermelon Monday through Saturday, and then I'm gonna have, you know, sweet potato and chickpeas and quinoa and leafy greens on Sunday. I'm gonna have rolled oats on Sunday, right? I'm gonna have cashews and cacao powder and my overnight oats on Sunday, right? That kind of thing. I'm gonna diversify and eat more cooked foods on Sunday. That makes a lot more sense. But just think that you're just gonna perpetually just swear off everything that isn't like watermelon or grapes is a bit. You can do it for a little bit. You can do it for 8 weeks, 12 weeks. Hell, you can do it for 6 months. But the longer you do it, it does catch up on you. You do have to diversify because you know what? We are opportunistic eaters for a reason. And if you have the opportunity to diversify, well, you should. Right? So take off the limitations, right? People have this weird glorification for like watermelon and grapes. So you can diversify. You can have the pineapples and the kiwis and, you know, the pears and peaches and, you know, the apples of all different types and things like that, the berries. And you can diversify, mangoes and all that, right? Eat all your colors: green, yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, right? Get all your colors, right? Generally speaking, if you eat all your colors, that's one of the best things that you can do is eat all your colors, right? And eat till you're full. Eat till you're full. Don't worry about overeating on a raw vegan diet, because that's not really possible because of how voluminous and water-rich the food is. It's going to be satiating. You get enough fiber in, you get enough water in, you're going to feel full. So under-eating, it's a big problem with like raw vegans. Now, if you're like really overweight, the under-eating is not really a problem right out the gate, but it becomes a problem. And now I'm going to get into my experiences with coaching other people, because, and there's scientific data behind this, right? Some people have a weight loss journey. They get a lot of initial results when they eat less. But then the eating less, it stops working. So then they keep cutting and cutting and cutting. I've talked to people about this, where increasing the amount of food that you eat actually causes you to drop more body fat, right? The reason why that works is because your body is always trying to adapt to your lifestyle. If you go from a lifestyle where you're eating Domino's Pizza, Burger King, McDonald's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Arby's, and then you go on like a fruit-rich raw diet, yeah, it's going to be jarring. You're going to be like, I'm hungry all the time. I want salt. I want fat. I want something more satiating. I want something warm. You're going to have all these cravings, because that hyper-palatable processed food destroyed your brain chemistry. So you're like, oh, I'm hungry all the time. You don't know what hunger feels like. You're a drug addict. It's important to understand that. Drug addict. If you are like 35% body fat, you're like, I'm hungry all the time, you're just having eating cues, because your blood sugar is dropping enough for your body to tap into stored fat. But you have addictions, you have food addictions, because you're constantly eating this hyper palatable foods, where you have geniuses and freaks in lab coats putting all types of chemicals and enriching foods for them so they can taste extremely good, like Doritos, where they take these chemicals and they sprinkle this pixie fairy dust all over Doritos, and it tastes insanely good. It's crack. This stuff lights your brain up like a Christmas tree, and you just keep eating and eating and eating and eating, right? Make a corn chip taste like steak. It's crazy. It's like, oh my God, these corn chips. Right? And you get a family bag and just keep eating the whole thing until there's none left. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're an opportunistic eater. Your primal brain takes over, right? And you just become, you become this knuckle-dragging, opportunistic, eater, swinging from trees and having a Dorito addiction, right? Because you're having these foods hijack your brain. You're not hungry. You don't know what real hunger feels like, right? Now, you have people, they're really committed to losing weight, and they do something, they're like, I'm going to do a juice fast. I'm just going to only drink juice. Now, the thing is, it's very, you're not going to be able to drink like 2,000 calories of like juice in a day, right? So chances are when you do a juice fast, really what you're doing is you're cutting out all your fats and you're cutting out the majority of your protein. So it's basically just water and simple forms of glucose. You even cut out the fiber, right? So you're in this massive caloric deficit where you're getting maybe like 1,000 calories a day, depending on how much juice you're drinking, right? It can feel really good in the start of when you're first doing it. But as your glycogen stores deplete, and as your fatty acids, your omega-3s, omega-6 those stores just start to decline, you start, look, your body digs into the crates and uses what it needs, because you're an opportunistic eater, which implies your body's also really good at storing nutrients. And you store a lot of it in your organ tissues and your bone marrow, etc., and it can hold you over for a really long time. So you do this extreme, you cut, right? You're barely eating and you lose a lot of weight in the beginning, and then it just stops. The reason why it stops is because your body has adapted to what you've been doing. So your body's energy efficiency will meet you where you are, and there will be a new baseline that is set. It's really what happens. Your body's always trying to adapt to what you're doing, right, in order to ensure your survival, right? So if your body is just burning 3,200 calories a day, and then you decide, I'm just going to eat 1,200 calories every day, well, then your body is going to notch down, and your daily caloric burn is going to step down, step down, step down, step down, step down, step down. And that crushes your metabolism over time, and it gives you these diminishing returns on weight loss, right? So your ability to lose weight declines because of that, because your body is doing what it's supposed to do, which is adapt to you. Now, if you break that pattern and you start eating more, and a raw vegan diet is really good for doing that, because once you start eating more fruits and things like that, well, your metabolism picks right back up. And then your insulin sensitivity picks back up. And as your insulin sensitivity increases, you have more energy availability, but your blood sugar level drops quicker. And so when your blood sugar level drops quicker to baseline, you get more opportunities in that fat burning zone throughout the day. So you accumulate more weight loss. Then also, all this swelling and bloating and water retention and edema and all of that starts to go down. So all of this water, all this excess water weight that you're carrying as a result of inflammation goes down. So people will be like, oh, it really shows in my face. It's like, yeah, because you're storing all this water and swelling in your face and your neck, and your adrenal glands are all swollen and whatnot from being inflamed, right? And so when you reduce the inflammation, yeah, it shows up in your face. I mean, you ain't really holding that much fat in your face, right? So like all underneath your chin and all of this around here, you ain't just storing like a whole stomach down there, right? It's a lot of inflammation. And so what I've learned, not just from my own personal experience, but coaching other people on a high raw diet, right, and see how things change for them. Blood pressure improves, blood sugar improves. You know, they get a little obsessive about the blood sugar numbers. Oh my God, I hit 90 today. Oh my God, I woke up at 90 today. Right? Oh, my blood sugar dipped way too low. I got to get off the metformin and the insulin, right? I can't even take the insulin and metformin anymore because it dropped my blood sugar too low. Right? It's a wild thing to see. And people are like, man, I've been diabetic and eating all this sugary fruit, and my blood sugar is better with the higher carbs and the sugary diet than with me cutting all my carbs. That was a lesson I really learned from, the studying a raw vegan diet, really. And there's science to support that as well. I've helped people on a raw vegan diet with erectile dysfunction. I've had people, they got their menstrual cycle back. I've had women with endometriosis. Right? We reversed endometriosis. We shrank fibroids. They got their menstrual cycle back. Their progesterone and estrogen levels balanced. Progesterone increased. Thyroid function increased. I've been able to help people get off of their thyroid medication where they were taking, levothyroxine, and then being able to come off of that because their thyroid, their T3 levels improved, and their TSH doesn't have to be super highly elevated anymore. So that number comes back down, and the T3 comes back up, and the T4 levels out, and all their hormones balance. I mean, the things that I've seen over the years of coaching people on their journey, it's fascinating stuff. Because for me, if I'm going to decide I'm going to do something and really commit to something, I want to know as much as possible about it. So I'm over here doing all this digging for the science to support this whole raw vegan thing. There's an abundance of it. Now, it's important to check in with your body, because it's not like, oh, there's just one particular diet plan that you can follow forever, regardless of the conditions. It's not really particularly how it works. So for me, I don't really do the cookie cutter diet plan thing, because as you change, your diet changes. As the seasons change, so does your diet, right? As your training program changes, as your body composition changes, so does your diet. Hell, even your schedule, as your schedule changes, so does your diet, right? So you can put in like counterbalances. In a live stream that I did a while back, I said every strategy that you deploy should be two-sided, right? There should be a counterbalance. That's why you need two sides, right? There has to be two facets. There has to be two sides to any strategy that you deploy. And the other side serves as a counterbalance against the other. So when you have a fully raw diet, you can either implement a cooked meal either a couple times a week or a couple times a month, or you can do a fully raw diet for 8 to 12 weeks and then shift off to a more high raw diet where you have a cooked meal on a daily basis, right? The cooked meal is the counterbalance. When you have two sides to the solution, you can deploy both sides at the same time, or you can deploy one side and then the other, right? And you can undulate back and forth between the two. So this gives you freedom. This gives you more dietary freedom so that you don't have all kind of nutrient gaps. People will do this 80-10-10 whole food plant-based diet. I'm going to go 80% carbs. I'm going to have my fats and proteins as low as possible perpetually. I don't think people should be doing that. It works. There's a time and place for it, but you know what? You should be adjusted to a high carb diet with really low fats, or when your fats are a bit higher and your carbs are a bit lower and your proteins a bit higher, right? You undulate this. You go through these phases. So it's important to check in on yourself. I'm not like an anti-dietary fat person. I'm not. It depends on where your fats come from. It depends on how much of your fats you eat, and it depends on what your goals are. Right? So I have a bit more of a nuanced approach. Right. I have dropped body fat on a raw vegan diet. I've gained weight, gained muscle mass on a raw vegan diet. I've done both. If I'm trying to gain weight, I'm going to have more fats in my diet. The reason why I'm going to do that is because it allows me to get more energy in. So I want to maximize the amount of carbohydrates I consume. Basically, if I'm trying to gain weight, I want to get in at least 300 grams of carbs a day and like 100 grams of fat a day. But it's going to be something along those lines. If I'm trying to gain weight. If I'm trying to lose weight, I'm going to shrink my eating window. My carbohydrates would come back a little bit, and my fats would come back a little bit. Now, I have two choices. I can cut my carbohydrates down into the earlier portion of the day, only getting anywhere between 150 to 200 grams of carbs a day, which is kind of low, and I can make up for it with more fats. I can do that. Or I can have my carbs at like 300 grams of carbs a day and have my fats to around 10 to 15%. Where I can do 1 gram of fat per kilogram of lean mass, or a half a gram of fat per kilogram of lean mass. A half a gram of fat per kilogram of lean mass I wouldn't necessarily do on a fully raw diet, at least in my position. I mean, I could, but I don't feel comfortable doing that for my personal preferences. I want something a little bit less extreme. So my dietary fats, for me specifically, personally, would be like around 20-25%. Now, what's interesting is I have experiences where I've played around with this. I felt really good scaling back my carbohydrates and then having a lot more energy come from fats like nuts and seeds and avocado and things like that. And it's really effective for me to lose weight and lean out and all that. It's really effective for me to do that in particular. It weighs on me a bit because it's a bit fatiguing. I get a little lethargic after a while. So as far as my energy, I can feel my energy level dissipate after a while with me doing that. That's why I don't like doing that very long. Generally speaking, high carb has worked the best for me more so than anything else. When it comes to mental health, emotional well-being, overall energy level, mental focus, high carb has always been the thing for me. Always worked the best out of anything I've ever did. So that's the thing that I've learned in particular. Yes, the high carb route Works phenomenal. Now, the interesting thing is when you do the high carb route, the weight loss is not guaranteed to be real quick. It's not really how it works. And the reason why is because you retain a lot more muscle glycogen. So your body's a lot more hydrated. Now, if you cut the carbohydrates, you actually lose a lot of water, so it shows up on the scale. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's fat loss. So if your weight on the scale swings 2-3 pounds from day to day, that's water weight, it's not fat. So you do have to have more of a long-term view. Right? So these are things that I've learned on my journey of how to structure your diet. So I want to, getting back to what I've learned, all of this is things that I've learned on my journey, but in particular in practice, diversifying. And this includes things like pea protein. I've learned the importance of hemp seeds. Whole to hemp seeds is like a staple food for me. Hemp seeds are a phenomenal source of iron, copper, magnesium, manganese, potassium, omega-3, omega-6, everything, right? It is phenomenal. It's a big deal. Hemp seeds are up there for me. Chia seeds and flax seeds, they're up there too, but hemp seeds taste the least bitter. So I personally have more of a preference for them because of that. Let me fix my camera setting here. Hold on. I got this motion sensing thing that it does. And it picks up gestures. So I don't want that. There we go. All right, we here. Red lentils. That's like my go-to cooked food. All right, so I like to do like a red lentil soup. That's a big thing for me. So with red lentils, I'll get like, let's say I want to increase the amount of protein in my diet, right? Not by much. I don't really have like necessarily like a high protein diet per se, but if I want to get more in my diet, 1 cup of red lentils is like 45 grams of protein, tons of magnesium, manganese. It's like 620 calories, somewhere around there, or whatever. Really big deal. So I'll take a cup of red lentils and pour it in a mason jar, put a sprouting lid on it, fill it up with water, rinse it a couple times till the water's clear, and then soak it overnight until the red lentils increase to like 4 times their size, and then cook them on the stove where I boil them for a few minutes, like 5 minutes or so. Put it in a blender with a variety of different types of seasonings, including nutritional yeast, which nutritional yeast is phenomenal because it's a great source of B12. So if you're concerned about B12 on a raw vegan diet, that nutritional yeast is a really beneficial thing to put in your food. Your body holds and maintains and stores B12 for years. Developing a B12 deficiency takes a long time to do. Your gut produces it, and it's very easy to get it from fortified foods, right? The people who are most likely to have a B12 deficiency are people where they have a compromised gut microbiome. It's not about your food intake. Anyway, so basically you can put a variety of different seasonings: curry, cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, sea salt, nutritional yeast, tomato sauce, all different types of things, right? However you want to season it, right? And you can puree the red lentils in a blender. You can add a little bit of water or whatever the case is for consistency, and boom, red lentil soup. On your raw vegan or high raw vegan diet, you can do that once or twice a week, right? To make sure that you're getting an abundance of, let's say, leucine or isoleucine or valine, right? These branched chain amino acids. So you can get an extra variety of that in there. Another option is sprouting lentils, right? So with the sprouting jar again, you can sprout lentils. So basically what you do is you can take, like, let's say a 1/4 cup or 1/2 cup of lentils, like green lentils or something like that. I've done it with green lentils. That's why I say green lentils. You put them in the jar, you fill it up with water, not too much, probably like 1/4 of the way or halfway. You don't need to put a lot of water. Probably put like that much water. rinse it a couple of times, and then you soak it for 24 hours. And then you'll start to see these little tails grow on the green lentils. They'll start to split a little bit. The outer layer of the fiber might start to come off, and it grows these little tails. That means they started sprouting. So you can empty the water out, and then you tip it over, let it drain, and it'll continue to grow these sprouts. It'll continue to sprout. And then you rinse them periodically throughout the day to keep them moist. You don't want them to dry out. And those tails will continue to grow over several days, right? So you can sprout them for a day and a half, 2 days, or 3 days, right? And you'll see those long tails. And this gives you a highly absorbable form of protein, magnesium, iron, copper, vitamin C, vitamin K, the antioxidants, selenium, chromium, all types of stuff. I mean, full amino acid profile, full mineral profile, sprouted lentils is a big deal. Understand it's a little bitter, right? So you may want to season them a bit. Some sea salt and a variety of other different seasonings. You may want to throw them in a salad with some leafy greens and other more palatable things, right? I don't have a problem with bitter, right? I drink my teas and I don't put any type of sweetener or anything. Bitter is medicinal. There's a benefit to the sprouts, and one of the benefits of the sprouts is it's very easy on your gut. So if you have, let's say you eat beans and they make you gassy and bloated, you may want to do sprouts. You may want to do that red lentil sauce like I mentioned. The soaking and the sprouting and things like that breaks down the lectins, that breaks down the extra phytic acid. It makes the nutrients more absorbable. And you hydrate the food, you hydrate the lentils. So as that water floods in, there's more oxygen, and it makes the nutrients within the food more bioavailable. Okay. Adding mushrooms into your diet. Let's say you have a vitamin D deficiency. You're taking vitamin D, you're getting the sunlight. Well, to complete the trifecta is adding in mushrooms into your diet. You can steam them, you can saute them, you can put them in the microwave, or you can eat them raw, either way, right? But mushrooms are a good source of vitamin D. Also a really good source of selenium, copper, iron, chromium, calcium, potassium, magnesium, manganese. You'll see a lot of the minerals I keep mentioning over and over because of how important they are. The B vitamins, right? All of the B vitamins, right, in the mushrooms. Vitamin K, vitamin C, right? Vitamin E. I mean, mushrooms are a phenomenal food. Nice meaty texture to them too, right? Really good in a salad. And you can really dice them up and things like that. Phenomenal food, right? You can do chicken of the woods, baby bella mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, that kind of thing, right? Just clean them off, right? Because you know when you get the mushrooms out of the pack, they still got the dirt on them and whatnot. I like it, to be honest. It's a little charming. I like my earthy food. Right? Good source of protein as well, full amino acid profile. So that's another good source of adding a lot of different nutrients to your diet too that you may not really be getting in any significant abundance from fruit. That's why it's good to diversify. And you don't have to diversify every day, but you can do it once a week, twice a week, maybe even 3 times a week. And these are ways to make sure that you don't develop deficiencies. People always talk about deficiencies on a raw vegan diet. It's like, first of all, most people with nutrient deficiencies are not vegan. They're not raw vegan. They're your standard. They're on your standard, diet, eating meat and whatnot. Most people who are B12 deficient are not vegan. Most people with B vitamin deficiencies are not vegan. Most people who are vitamin K deficient are not vegan. Most people who have a deficiency in omega-3 are not vegan. Most people with vitamin D deficiency, magnesium deficiency are not vegan. So when we talk about nutrient deficiencies, the people who are the most at risk for nutrient deficiencies are people who eat animal products, right? They're non-vegans. Right? That's just like, it's a cultural thing. Oh, you're not eating meat, you're going to have deficiencies. No, most people with the deficiencies who are sitting up in the hospital right now are not vegan, right? You don't have just the ICU filled up with a bunch of, starving, malnourished vegans. That's not a thing, right? Even iodine deficiency. The people who are most likely to be iodine deficient are not vegan. DHA, EPA deficiency, mostly for people who are not vegan. Most people who have dementia or neurodegenerative diseases, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, not vegan. Most people who are diabetic, not vegan and don't have a high carb diet. Most people with high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, not vegan. Right? So yeah, I talk about the nutrient deficiency thing, and the protein deficiency is not a thing. Protein deficiency is just another term for starvation. In order for you to be protein deficient, you would have just had to have gone a very prolonged period of time with like no access to food. Opportunistic eaters are very good at storing nutrients in their body. Stored in your bone marrow, your vital organs, and all of that. The human body is very good at storing and hoarding resources. Okay. It has been in my experience, because I'm like, well, hell, shoot, I can just go like in a week. I'm like, I just feel like just not even eating anything but fruit, and then feel better when I do that. It's like, wow, I didn't cut out all of these other foods. I cut out the oats, I cut out lentils, I cut out leafy greens, I cut out nuts, I cut out seeds, and I'm just eating fruit and feel great. How is that? How do you cut out all this other nutrition and still feel great? It's like, well, because sometimes you got to give your body a break. Another lesson I've learned, right? Going back to everybody's favorite thing they want to know about protein. What if I have a fear of losing weight, right? Some people are like, I don't want to lose too much weight. I don't want to be scrawny. If I go on this raw vegan diet, am I just going to hemorrhaging weight? I'm going to be all frail looking and sickly looking. Look at me. Do I look frail and sickly looking? Oh. People who are meat eaters, they're like, man, I want to get a physique like you. I'm like, word? You want to eat like a scrawny vegan like me? Your body doesn't care whether you're eating the meat off an animal's ass or you're eating fruits and vegetables. It doesn't make a difference. Do you have the energy? Are you getting enough energy from your body in order to maintain cellular duplication or not? That's it. Doesn't really matter where you get it from. When it comes to building muscle, if you want to grow muscle, there's two qualifications. You need to maximize the energy storage inside the environment of the muscle. That's number one. And then number two, you need to have enough energy inside the muscle available to duplicate, to make copies of that muscle tissue. That's it. You don't need a whole lot more protein. You do need a lot more energy, specifically glucose. If your body is going to go ahead and make new cells, well, that costs energy. And that's where the carbohydrates come in. That's where the sugar comes in. Yeah, you need protein as the basis and the building blocks, but I mean, muscle is only made of like 25% protein. The rest is like water and glycogen, water and sugar. And muscle stores, for every molecule of glycogen, for every molecule of glucose that your muscle stores, it also stores along with it 3 molecules of water, right? So water and glycogen at a 3-to-1 ratio is stored inside muscle tissue. And as you store that glucose and water inside the muscle tissue, it expands the size of the muscle tissue. And as that size of the muscle tissue expands, that muscle is full and strong and has an abundance of available energy. And that available energy is used in order to make more muscle cells, more muscle tissue. It's able to create more motor neurons, right? And expand the infrastructure of your nervous system, right? Your body is able to make more blood plasma, more red blood cells, more white blood cells, right? It's able to create more nerve endings and all this type of stuff, just creating all types of new infrastructure. But your body needs energy to do that. So if you want to grow and build muscle and all of that type of stuff, you primarily need an abundance of energy and sleep. You don't build muscle without sleep. If you want to drop body fat, you want to build muscle mass, you have to have the energy balance and the sleep quality in order to do it. If you're lacking sleep, if you're lacking energy, it's not going to happen. As far as your protein intake is concerned, and calculating your protein intake is dependent on the amount of training you're doing and the amount of glycogen that you're getting in your diet, the amount of glucose you're getting in your diet. So generally speaking, the more carbohydrates you have in your diet, the less protein you need. The less carbohydrates you have in your diet, the more protein you need. Now, there are two primary states. There is an anabolic state, which symbolizes growth, and there's a catabolic state, which is the opposite of growth. It's a shrinkage or a decline, a breakdown. Build up is anabolic, breakdown is catabolic. If you can keep your glycogen stores inside your muscle tissue full, that maintains an anabolic state inside the muscle tissue, which is conducive to growth. If you're depleted of that glycogen inside your muscle tissue, well, your muscle tissue is much more likely to be in a catabolic state because there isn't enough energy available to be able to sustain the metabolic processes of that muscle. And now that muscle is going to be more prone to catabolism or muscle breakdown. Muscle breakdown is protein loss. So the proteins become damaged, oxidized, and this results in muscle loss. If you want to reduce muscle loss as much as possible, well, you can either add more protein into your diet or add more carbohydrates into your diet. If you add more protein into your diet, you're doing that because you're replacing the amino acids or you're replacing the protein that you're losing in the catabolic state. If you add in more carbohydrates instead, you're preventing the catabolism and preventing the breakdown of the protein, which reduces the need for you consuming more protein anyway. So increased protein is meant to replace the protein you're losing in the catabolic state, and the increased carbohydrates is to prevent the catabolism of the protein. That's basically how that works. You have two options, either one you want to use. It is more advantageous to add more carbohydrates and prevent the catabolism. Now, the beautiful thing about when you prevent the catabolism, that means you maintain more of an anabolic state inside the muscle tissue, which is more conducive to growth. There's a law, a universal law, that is applied to the human physiology, which anything that isn't growing is dying. That's the rule. There is no such thing as maintenance. Either it's growing or it's dying, right? So if your nutrition is geared towards growth, well, then you're much more likely to get the muscle increases that you're looking for. So this is where it makes sense to have a priority on preventing the catabolism. Now, this is my experience because when I would be like, you know what, I'm just going to go nuts and I'm going to have a whole bunch of fruit bowls throughout the day. Right? I'm going to do some grapes and grapefruit and tangerines. I'm going to do some watermelon. I'm going to do some pineapple. I'm going to have a bunch of apples. I'm just going to accumulate fruits and whatnot throughout the day, kiwis and whatnot. I'm getting an abundance of vitamin C. I'm getting an abundance of B vitamins, magnesium, potassium. I'm getting all these electrolytes and antioxidants. And all of these things are working together to reduce oxidation and catabolism. So essentially, all of these raw vegan foods are geared towards preventing the breakdown of muscle tissue. If you're preventing the breakdown, what you're really doing inadvertently is improving the rate at which you recover. If you improve the rate that you recover, you can train more frequently, you can train harder, and you can get more growth. If you're just simply just adding more protein into your diet, it doesn't really work the same, right? Because it's like you're digging a hole, or you're actually filling a hole, and you're getting a shovel and you're digging and you're dumping dirt into the hole, and then somebody else is coming and scooping dirt out of the hole. So you're putting dirt in, and then somebody else is scooping dirt out, and you're working against the other person scooping the dirt out. Whereas if you add all the antioxidants, the water, the electrolytes, the carbs into your diet, then basically what that looks like is you're removing the person who is on the other side working against you, shoveling the dirt out of the hole that you're trying to fill. It's a good analogy. So this is scientifically how it works. This is the biochemics, right? The biomechanics of how it works. But this has also been my experience. This is one thing that I've learned. And I am still prone to that old way of thinking of like, I gotta add a little bit more girth to my diet. I gotta add something more savory, some more cooked foods to my diet. And I'll get into the habit of doing that, and I'll realize that I won't feel as good doing that. And it's a reminder. But I don't sleep as well. I feel a little bit heavier, a little slower. I don't recover as quicker. Training seems more difficult. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm eating a lot more. My food is a lot more calorically dense, and I'm not as water rich. Let me go back to this whole raw thing. Let me lean more into that. And then I do that, and then there's a noticeable difference. And I'm like, well, damn. That's my experience. So even my experience, because I still battle against like these old thought processes and things that, these, what do they call them? Intrusive thoughts. What if you just add more potatoes? What if you just add more protein? What if you just add more fats? What if you just add? And I get slapped on the wrist for doing it. I'm like, all right. And you find something that works, so you'd stick with it. It just works. Right? It just seems very counterintuitive because it just goes against what we've been told. What's interesting is I've gotten more open-minded over time on my raw journey. I've gotten way more open-minded. I start thinking, one of our biggest problems is vitamin D deficiency, especially if you're black. We spend way too much time indoors, way too much. We put all of this effort into keeping a roof over our head, and we spend all of this time under a roof of some sort, whether it be at work or at home. And that roof is driving us deeper and deeper and deeper into a vitamin D deficiency. If you have an autoimmune disorder, you need to understand this. Because vitamin D deficiency is a trigger for autoimmune disease. So if you have MS, lupus, Guillain-Barré, Hashimoto's, eczema, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, whatever the case is, that lack of sunlight, that lack of sun exposure, that is a trigger. So you may want to add in those mushrooms, a supplement with vitamin D, and spend more time out in the sun. Right? So that's a little nugget there. Right? What are some other lessons that I want to cover? Because I think I've covered most of it. I'll take some questions from you guys in a second. Going through my mental Rolodex. Did I cover all of it? I gotta talk about training some other time, but that's mainly when I wanted to cover about what I've learned. But main points: eat enough, eat in abundance, diversify, make sure your diet is water-rich, energy-rich, electrolyte-rich. I think that covers it, y'all. I think I got through it. So let's get to some of y'all questions. for tonight. Let's get to some of these questions and see what we got here. Questions or comments? All right, let's see. All right. Do you think 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram per body weight of protein is enough for building muscle? It depends on what your body fat percentage is. So basically, you should calculate your protein intake according to your lean mass, not your total body weight. So 1 to 1.2 kilograms of lean mass is definitely enough to build muscle. Yes. But just keep in mind that that number, it may not be enough protein to build muscle if your carbohydrates are too low. If your carbs are too low or your overall energy consumption is too low. So you have to think about how energy rich your diet is at large. My gym told me to back off my gyno told me to back off of mushrooms because of my candida diagnosis. I don't know if mushrooms negatively affect candida necessarily. I haven't really seen any strong evidence for that. Candida is more or less a metabolic issue. I mean, you could back off of the mushrooms. You may not need to eat them every day. Maybe you can do them a couple times a week. But if you have a candida issue, it's a good idea to increase the amount of leafy greens you consume and have more, herbs, more herbal tea that is antifungal, antibacterial, and antiviral. So it could be a good idea to drink more cinnamon tea, basil tea, nettle tea, turmeric tea, ginger tea, things like that, right? So having tea several times a day throughout the day, that would really help with that candida issue, right? Because that is predominantly a gut health issue. Is coconut oil to take? Is coconut oil to take? I don't know what that means. Oh, is it okay to take? I guess you could. I don't really recommend necessarily taking coconut oil. You can eat coconut. That's what I'm more geared towards is eating. I'd rather you eat coconut in general. Coconut yogurt, coconut milk, coconut water, coconut in general. Yeah. I remember watching a short you posted. How many G of protein per pound of body weight did you suggest? I know it's much lower than it purported. I've seen it in my own training already. Yeah, so typically what I say is anywhere from 1 gram to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass. That's the general recommendation. But in between 1 and 1.2 is enough for most people. I'm loving this lesson. I've learned a lot. I appreciate you. Appreciate you tuning in. You should do a live demo on sprouted lentils. That's a good idea, actually. Talk more about that. My mama do. Thank you for all this information. It's awesome. I appreciate you always tuning in. You're a writer. That's my mama do in the stream here. Look like we got folks cross-chatting in here. What's great to hear? Last year when I did my 90-day raw, my blood pressure was awesome in a few days. This time around, I'm 2 months raw, and my blood pressure hasn't changed much. It's my diastolic number, always around 90. Yeah, we got to take a little bit about, there's got to be something else in the picture, right? Some things that you really need to consider in your blood pressure. Sleep quality, vitamin D level, magnesium content of your diet, how much food you're consuming. Here's a few things you may want to take into account. You may want to add, herbal teas. You may want to add maybe beet juice. You may want to add green tea into your diet or moringa tea. There's a few things that can help with that. So steaming is better than cooking. Yeah, I mean, steaming technically is a form of cooking, but Steaming, it's seems to be one of the top ones to do. Okay, got you. My man James. I know my blood pressure has stayed consistently in the normal range since I've been high raw. There we go. Yeah, blood pressure is pretty easy to fix. Read today that diets of centenarians in places such as Japan and Sardinia, Italy, are mostly plant-based, very little meat. Yep. People like to call it like what, the Mediterranean diet, or the different things to call it, but yeah. I mean, hey, it is what it is. Which plant foods are harmful to the kidneys? It depends on what the kidney issue is, right? So there aren't really necessarily any plant foods, at least that I know of, that are harmful to your kidneys. It depends on how much of that food you're eating and what your kidney issue is, right? So it's a bit more of a nuanced issue than that. I have CKD stage 2 and 2 months in on a raw diet, and I have not seen my blood pressure change yet. Last year I did 90-day raw. My blood pressure was amazing. I have to schedule appointment. I have to schedule an appointment with a kidney doctor. Got you. Yeah, so it would be really interesting to see what your diet currently looks like now. You may want to book a call with me if you want. I have links I have links in the description where you can book a call with me. In the description of this video, you can book a call with me, and we can talk more about your approach, so I can get more information on what your current diet looks like as far as that's concerned. So you got stage 2 kidney disease. I mean, we have to take a look at, how you're structuring your meals, how much dietary fat you're having in your meals, what are your fat sources, are you using oils, what's your sleep quality like, how much you're eating. So there's a lot of different things to take into account, right? So yeah, a few things to consider there. Right? How much protein you're having in your diet. There's a few things that we could talk about. All right, so it looks like I covered all the questions here. There we go. All right. Folks, if you need help, if you need coaching support, I have links in the description. You can book a call with me. You can join my 12-week mentorship. You can sign up for personalized coaching or personal diet plan, right? Or sign up for my free newsletter. All of those links are in the description of this video. All right. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. I think this is a productive chat, folks. And I will catch y'all on the next Monday Night Live. Take care.